Summer may have told me.
I have 2:15. And I see Patty, Lisa. Jerry, are you waiting on anybody else?
I don't think so.
Okay.
But we've got Lisa Rittenhouse, is anyone online, right?
Yep.
Yeah. I think we're okay.
Okay, so if everybody's ready and CNET's ready, I'll go ahead and call to order the Board of Supervisors and Planning Commission joint work session for Wednesday, June 14th. And up first is public input for public comment on any item not currently on the agenda. And seeing none, we'll go to the manager for announcements.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to members of the board, planning commission, staff, and the public for joining us this afternoon for the June 14th work session as a joint meeting between the Ferguson Township Board of Supervisors and the Ferguson Township Planning Commission. This meeting has been properly advertised in accordance with the Pennsylvania Sunshine Act as a hybrid meeting with the option to attend virtually or in person here in the main meeting room. If you are in attendance virtually using the Zoom platform and wish to speak on behalf of an agenda item, please say your name, municipality of residence, and the topic you wish to speak on when the chairwoman calls on you. If you are attending in person with us in the main meeting room and wish to speak on behalf of an agenda item, please address the board at the podium and state your name, municipality of residence, and the topic you wish to speak on. Prior to commencing the meeting, I have a few short procedural items to cover. First, members of the public attending using the Zoom platform are asked to remain muted during the meeting to prevent any ambient noise from disrupting the meeting. If a member of the public is acknowledged by the chair, they may unmute their microphone for their question or comment. Secondly, board members are asked to indicate their name when motioning or seconding a motion. However, we are having a work session, so there will be no action taken at this meeting. And now finally, a roll call vote, first starting with the Board of Supervisors. Please state that you are here when your name is called. Ms. Strickland?
Here.
Ms. Stevens?
Here.
Mr. Thompson?
Here.
Mr. Gracie Griffin?
I'm here.
Ms. Deneni?
Here.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum for the Board of Supervisors. I'll now take a roll call vote for Planning Commission. Jerry Benny?
Here.
Ellen Terracani?
Here.
Rob Crossweller?
Here.
Ralph Whelan?
Here.
Louis Steinberg?
Here.
Lisa Rittenhouse?
Here.
And there's a quorum for the Planning Commission. Oh, my apologies. Oh, now I'm on. Jennifer, yes, I know. Jennifer.
Here.
Thank you. All right, Madam Chair, you have a quorum for both Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors.
Thanks very much. Okay, so just to give us kind of a layout of the work session, our consultants have a presentation prepared, and they also have questions for us to discuss and give feedback on, so we'll move through that. There's a general Q&A at the end of their presentation, so we can go around and take additional comments for things that maybe weren't touched on during the general Q&A. I'll ask Centrise to give us a time check as we get close to 2:05 if we get to that point, so that we have time for public comment before our hard stop at 2:15. So I'll turn it over to the consultants now.
Thank you. Jenna, you want to bring up the presentation?
Yep. I think I can.
And I see Lisa Rittenhouse with a hand up. Lisa, did you have a question?
Wonder if she can hear us.
Patty, are you able to hear us?
I just received a message from Rhonda, and Zoom participants may not be able to hear. She specifically cannot hear currently.
That's what I was wondering.
Madam Chair, our Assistant Township Manager is working to alleviate the audio matter. You could give us just a moment.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you.
Corey, Patty, or anyone online, are you able to hear us yet? I'm getting
So they
no
heard us for roll
response.
call, right?
Yeah.
I'm sorry,
Yes.
I was checked out for that.
Yes.
But, so when the presentation went up, is that when the problem occurred?
I think so, because we did receive responses when we did a roll call, but I believe when that.
Still can't hear.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, we can hear you.
Okay.
Sorry.
James, can I provide some assistance?
I'm gonna go print a pre-handed Give you guys a sec.
Really appreciate how intensely
Rhonda, can you
we'll
hear?
do everything.
Yes,
Okay, so let's go ahead and pull the PowerPoint back up.
but now we can't.
What about now? No.
Technology is wonderful.
Yeah, I stood up, if I lean back, let's do audio.
Maybe it's reception.
What I want to talk about afterwards is some legal, not legal advice, but maybe recommendations. Which kid in the county? When the suggestion.
In there?
Yes. Rhonda, can you hear us now?
Yes,
I think it's our connection. So we're
but
good.
no, now it's gone.
Oh my. So Tracy can't move, you just have to.
I'm just gonna
stand
right
there.
lean over like this. Can you hear me now?
You got good vibes going right
As
there.
soon as I lean up, it's no longer working. Okay. So is there something that
And now.
And now.
you can hear us now? So I'm gonna stand up straight. And see, can you hear us now? Okay.
Okay.
Slowly.
I'm gonna slowly walk away. Madam Chair, I don't really know that we have identified the problem to ensure that it won't happen again.
Okay, well, let's, open the PowerPoint and see if you can still hear us. Okay, they can still hear us and the PowerPoint is on.
Oh, it's windy today.
Okay, so let's go ahead and get started while they can hear us.
You can advance. That just is going over the project team from the township side that we've been working with closely, the planning staff, as well as the consultants. I think most of you know us by now. I'm Brandy Rosselli with Mackin, and I have Amy Wiles with E Holdings on the consulting side. You can advance, Jenna. So for today's agenda, we just want to do a brief project overview, go over the public input opportunities that have been provided, talk a little bit about an overview of what some of the draft, like the major revisions that are being suggested. And then we have a few items for review and discussion for the board and planning commission, and then we will do around the table for additional questions, comments that weren't covered, and followed up with the public comment. So go ahead and advance. So the input opportunities that were provided, we did have ongoing online engagement with a web page where comments could be provided through there. We had a stakeholder survey that was active May and June of last year. We did focus groups also in the summer of last year with residents, Penn State, and government and planners. We had our first public meeting in August. We offered an in-person and virtual option for that. There was a design charrette in October of last year with local professionals as well as some of the public participated in that as well, and Planning Commission. Our second public meeting was in March of this year, which also had in-person and online options. So in terms of the update to the draft regulations, you were provided with clean copies as well as redlined copies of the zoning and the design guidelines. So some of the major changes in regard to zoning, one, we are looking at expanding the boundary of the Terrace Streetscape District. We also we have removed currently you have different regulations if you are a lot of 0.4 or greater, 0.4 acres or greater, and then the 0.39 or less. So there was different options for uses that were allowed. We've taken that out and just included a minimum square foot regulation. In terms of the uses, pretty much kept it the same. Folks that participated seemed to like the mix of options. One thing that was added was municipally owned parking garage. We also moved from hotel into conditional uses with some conditions. There was concerns regarding a hotel with the size and lighting and all of that. So that currently was moved to conditional use out of permitted. We also moved veterinary clinic into permitted uses. And like I said, we have removed all of the regulations in regarding to lot size. So right now, all of the uses are for any size lot. There are some regulations for specific uses, but in general, we removed the 0.4 or greater. For the setbacks, front yard setbacks, we have made it flexible with a no minimum front yard setback, but a maximum of 20 foot. But there are some regulations, if you do have a 20-foot setback, there are some regulations in terms of what needs to be provided in that setback area. And then, what else for the setbacks? Everything else was pretty much for the setbacks, for the major changes for rear and side.
Residential uses.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes, the buffering.
Buffer yards.
The buffer yards, yeah. We did include buffer yards for residential, for uses that abut residential uses and structures. There are increased buffer yard requirements there. So I think, Jenna, you can advance. Amy's going to go over some of the updates to the design requirements.
Thanks, Brandy. So, like Brandy said, you guys have two copies. So you have a red line version and then you have a clean version. The red line version, we wanted to make sure that you have that so that you can, as you're reviewing it, you can see what things were either moved around, what things were deleted, what things were added. So hopefully it will help you in your review. It does get a little unwieldy though, especially when things are moved. It might show as deleted and then added later. So we wanted to give you both versions, and so if you have any questions after we kind of go through the major things, please let us know. Again, I know it can be hard to follow as things are continually changing in those versions. So within the design guidelines section, the design standards, we were asked to go through and update those based on some of the changes that we made to the zoning to really just the major changes were just kind of to streamline the regulations, make it hopefully more clear, and make it easier to understand. And some of that, and this is why maybe it might be a little confusing too with the redlined, some things were moved. So we did move things around between design standards and zoning back and forth where we felt that they made more sense. So within this design standards section, under intent, we did take out the description of where the district is, that's under zoning. We don't need to reiterate that within the design standards. The next major change is under synergy, where we talk about mixed-use development. And the biggest change here was we expanded the design standards to really apply to and include non-residential and residential development, as opposed to right now it calls out specifically commercial. We wanted to be a little more flexible so that mixed-use developments don't necessarily have to have commercial or retail on that first floor. They might have things like, if it's an apartment building, for example, it might have a gym facility or some other things that aren't necessarily commercial or retail, but are still non-residential in use. So that's really the biggest change there. It's just about restricting dwelling units on that first floor, not other types of uses. Under density, this is a question that actually we will get to in a few minutes, but about the idea about the density. So that we will bring that up for discussion. So I'll come back to that. And then very minimal changes, honestly, to the streetscape design standards themselves until we get to the building setback. And then this is where we start to explain the front yards and what has to go into the front yard standard, or what actually happens in the front yard. So in your zoning, it lays out your front yard setbacks. So, if you're on West College, currently it's that 0 lot line, right? The buildings have to be built right to the sidewalk. We're providing a flexible front yard, so people can still choose to build right to the sidewalk and have 0 front yard, but they can also build 20 feet off of that. Within the design standards, that's where we lay out what has to be. If you choose to have a setback and have a front yard, this is where then we start stipulating what has to be included within that front yard. And so the idea being here that it's about, making sure that it's, if you are choosing to have a front yard, then, it should be landscaped. If you're having some type of retail, or restaurant use, then if you're choosing to have a deeper setback, then you should have outdoor seating. So it's kind of where we lay out, if you're going to have a front yard, what needs to go in that, what it might look like. I will say that there is one mistake on page 8 of the red line version. It shows that all of the site furnishings is removed. I'm not sure how that happened in this copy. We're not removing that, so my apologies on that. So if you have questions there, that is a mistake. I think we moved it somewhere, but I'm not sure. Again, with the track changes, it got lost somewhere, but I promise we're not removing that. So please ignore that section that does show as redlined, but we're not removing it. Some of the biggest changes did come through your building design and facade considerations and building massing. We removed a lot of this stuff. A lot of it's already covered under your design standards. Some of it is duplicative, and then some of it is just, we did try and remove things where it wasn't really saying anything. Like, there was some language in there about being pleasing to the eye and things like that, and we just took it out. If you're not being prescriptive, then there's no reason to have it in there. So we really just tried to make it a little more streamlined and easier for somebody to follow and understand what we're actually requiring. We also cleaned up some of the articulations and building facades to make that a little bit easier to understand. We removed the one section said storefront design. We changed it to building ground floor design because, again, we are relaxing those restrictions where currently the ground floor had to be some type of commercial or retail use, and we're relaxing that to just be a non-residential use. So those are the major changes there. The corner building sites, we removed that altogether. There's no longer the requirement that the corner building has to be higher and built to the sidewalk, so we did remove that. And then we did add some additional stuff to parking structures. We did reduce the height requirement for parking structures from, I believe it was 45 feet, and you could go up. Currently, we reduced it to being 30 feet, which would be in keeping with the rest of the building height requirements. and then they could get an incentive, and we are going to talk about incentives too. That is one of our slides later. We're going to talk about the use of incentives and when you guys might want to consider applying those and for what. But for the parking structures, it's reduced to 30 feet with an additional height of up to 15 feet. If 50% of the roof is planted, like a green roof and some other things. And again, we can discuss that, but that keeps the building height the same for all buildings in the district. And that way, you certainly don't want your parking garage to be 15 feet higher than all the rest of your buildings in that district. And then parking incentives, again, we're going to talk about incentives, but we did delete the parking incentives from this section for right now. And then that's really it. That's a very quick overview of the major changes in the design standards. And Brandy and I are going to go through some of the major items that we have questions on, that in our review with township staff, we really felt like they were some of the big ticket items that we really needed more input from the board as well as planning commission. We wanted to hear more from you guys about what you're looking for. So that's really what this next section of the presentation is about, hearing from you guys on major questions that we have. And then, of course, once we go through those, if you have additional questions, comments, we'll get to those.
Yeah, and I did also want to point out for the zoning, we did incorporate the maximum height of 45 feet that was currently updated through an amendment. We did leave in incentives for the workforce housing, an additional 10 feet for that. And then, as Amy said, we do have questions about if you want to offer other incentives for building height and other items in the zoning. So the first question that we have and came up during our process is the name Terraced Streetscape District may not apply anymore in terms of how the district is being developed and just for ease of understanding what the district is. So we have some potential options up there, and again, today no final decisions are being made. We just wanted to get some input in terms of the name of the Terraced Streetscape District, if you like that, if you like any of the options up there, for just the further discussion. So this is open for anyone to just kind of let us know what you think about the name of the Terraced Streetscape District.
Thanks. We can go to the board first this time. We can flop thoughts on the names, the suggestions up there, the current name.
Yeah, the
and
suggestions
others.
are, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Go ahead.
The West College Corridor, neighborhood mixed use, West College mixed use, town center. Those were just some things that we threw around talking with staff, but we want to open that up.
I have a question about process, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Thanks. So is this then the last slide, and so we're entering board I'll direct it to you. Is this then the last slide, and now we're entering board discussion with this being our window into it? Or is this like we're having a moment to talk about these names, and then we're going to go back to the presentation?
So we have several questions
Okay.
that we wanted to go through with the board and planning commission, and then finish it up with open discussion and questions. So there are 6 or so specific things that we had questions on for you. This is the first of those 6.
I see. I would like to reserve then my opinion on the name until the end, because I feel like it's a culmination of our discussion. So for example, exploring through our discussion the idea of corridor and mixed use through the details that we've been presented would then perhaps lead us to a better of a name idea. That's just my process. That's how I kind of like funnel my information, but others may do it differently.
Sure. Okay.
But I'll reserve my thought on the name till the end, or till later.
Sure, and we
Thank
will
you.
have the open discussion where each of you will have a chance to then
Wonderful.
provide additional comment.
Sounds good. And I saw Patty's hand go up.
Thanks. No, I was just going to weigh in and say I like the West College corridor.
Thanks, Patty. Jeremy or Corey?
Nice name selections, but I am waiting to see if there's something more hype or cool that, just pops out.
Oh, quick question too about this. Could we get a map in companion? Because the word corridor implies something and you expanded the corridor. So could we get a map up next to those names while we talk about them? And then maybe the idea of corridor is no longer as smart if it's a blob. I mean, shape-wise. I don't know what it looks like. Thanks.
And I think the map is on
The next slide.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah.
It's not huge,
Yeah.
but it.
Because in Pine Grove Mills, like when we went through that much longer process with like a whole bunch more people, like we didn't like corridor because it implied somebody driving through and not a neighborhood where people were. And it's like how PennDOT talks about neighborhoods, which isn't really like in a neighborhoody way. So I just wondered if that matched. And it does look like, a PennDOT corridor. So thanks.
I'll go to Corey if you had any comment.
Yeah, I think my only comment about the name is that I would reiterate Laura's comment about what a corridor implies versus a neighborhood. I think neighborhood is maybe a better term for what it is we're trying to do. And then I guess naming it after the place, my only hesitation there is, do we think that there might be other parts of the township in the future that we might extend the zoning to? And so naming it after the street that's right there might not be appropriate if we're thinking in the future we want to have similar denser neighborhoods elsewhere in the township.
Thanks, Corey. Yeah, my initial thought based on these is I like a combination of West College and neighborhood. I think that is just a good descriptor for the area. The framework that's outlined here definitely could be picked up and applied somewhere else in the future, but I wouldn't have a problem using this name and then, because it would have to be customized to whatever area we moved it to and creating a different kind of zoning. So I wouldn't be too hesitant there, but I appreciate the point of reusing the zoning guidelines that we're going to be creating here. So I'm going to turn it over to Jerry to
Yeah, I
go
mean,
through
I
planning.
think keeping the West College makes sense to me. Either mixed use or West College neighborhood. I mean, you can maybe mix or match the words a little bit, but that makes sense to me. I don't know if any of the other commission.
I don't agree.
Yeah?
I think neighborhood mixed use, because I agree that it could be used someplace else. And then you gotta go through the whole thing of advertising and change, I'm thinking about what's up at North Atherton with the Aldis and stuff like that. That could be
Right.
something like that, Martin Street. So I would rather see neighborhood mixed use as a.
I like West College corridor, but I do like the idea of adding neighborhood into it somehow or something like that, because it's a little bit more descriptive of what we're actually working with rather than some sort of corridor. Yeah. But I agree, we might want to listen some more. Maybe we'll get something else.
Yep, Lewis, go ahead.
The reason I like including West College in it, whether it be a corridor, neighborhood, or mixed use, is if you talk in terms of simply neighborhood mixed use or town center, are we somehow stepping on the idea of the traditional town district and causing perhaps confusion?
Good points.
Because isn't the new area down by the borough office going to be a town center in State College, like the new apartments and hotel there? I think it's called Town Center.
It's Town Center TM.
Oh, TM.
I'm joking, that's my joke,
Oh,
sorry.
okay.
It's sort of like, isn't it a common thing that we're hearing town center now?
Yeah.
Kind of in,
Yeah. So it'd be kind of confusing if it was the same. Yeah.
Right, that's why I would not be supportive of town center, because that was also the idea at Pine Hall too,
Oh,
was that
yeah.
was going to be the town
Yeah.
center. So it's, West College, I think in this time that we're in, it just points people to what exactly it is we're talking about. No one has ever understood, unless you attend planning commission regularly, what the TSD is. And so I welcome the opportunity to have the the geographic area in with the title. But I appreciate the concerns about reusing the guidelines, so that's something to take into consideration. Any other,
I was going to say, are we allowed to comment back to the planning commission for a minute about this? Because
Yeah,
Rob said something really interesting I wanted to follow up on.
Yeah, the consultants are looking for discussion and feedback on these items, so.
Because
it
I
helps.
didn't personally, I'm interested in more detail, but like something you said, so again, referring back to the Pine Grove Mills process, one thing that we've talked about is the potential for leaving the underlying zoning. Wouldn't really apply in this condition, but anyway, we'll get there. And doing an overlay to achieve what we want to achieve. So I have frequently thought that this area is akin to North Atherton in many ways because it's a perimeter of commercial against a neighborhood that we want to preserve. So how do you do that? Our solution, when we were a previous board, I don't know if anybody in this board was here, but you probably remember when we went through the major zoning revision, actually you were probably on planning commission, we decided to leave that North Atherton corridor office commercial. And the reason why we did that is to protect the neighborhood and because we weren't seeing vacancy. Now, we're seeing a weird thing on West College, but a lot of that has to do with the influence of the major landowner there and what they are or aren't going to do. So that's a little bit different. But my point is, in thinking about the transferability of it and how we have similar PennDOT corridors that we are protecting neighborhoods from and yet interacting them in commercial manner, the idea of a more transferable overlay that manages that kind of a thing in Pine Grove Mills, North Atherton, and this West College area is a really interesting idea to me that if I were continuing with the board, which I'm not, I would be interested in hearing the Planning Commission's kind of feedback about how that is or isn't transferable and how they do or don't see the differences. So when we're talking about this name, I'm thinking, even though I frequently describe it as West College, I think the potential is for another branch of an idea, which would be to have more of an overlay. In that case, the conversation with the consultants would have been very different, which I was trying to nudge us in that direction early on, whereupon we changed the underlying zoning to a small degree. Maybe some of it is commercial, some of it is residential, some of it is R2, et cetera. And then this overlay is overlaid upon it to achieve development, things that we would like to develop while minimizing risk. So that was kind of like, I probably am maybe done talking for the rest of the thing. All of my thoughts went to a much more, I'm going to say germane, not necessarily comprehensive, but germane revision of this area. So it related maybe to something more conceptually like that because I thought it was a better tool. So when you said what you said, it kind of was like, that's kind of how I was thinking about it. So, thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, the use of an overlay is a really interesting idea and one we've talked about for Pine Grove Mills a lot, and we have a couple of them already, so it's something worth exploring in the future for some of those areas, and other ones that come up that would want to use this kind of zoning framework. Any other comments, Jennifer? Looking around, anybody who hasn't commented yet?
I do concur that the use of town center is not, it's going to be confusing, would not be a good use in this situation.
Ralph, anything?
Well, like West College mixed use, I guess, would maybe be my preference because neighborhood to me kind of implies residential neighborhood, and I don't feel that this is while there may be a lot of people living here at some point, it doesn't fit as being called a neighborhood to me. And just something Laura just said about the corridor overlay doesn't apply to this at all, right? That's correct. No, okay, it's corridor overlay. And another thing you said was you enlarged the map. What did we enlarge it to?
So that's on the next slide.
Okay. I'm ahead of
You're ahead of your
time.
time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Jeremy, did you have something?
Yeah, I concur with maybe not necessarily naming the zoning something specific to the identity of the area, but at the same time, I don't think it would hurt to maybe give the area or the whole project a more identifying name to it. We see that with like Colonnade, Patton Crossing, Northland, like we don't necessarily refer to the particular zoning of those areas when talking about them, but what they basically have came named after. And I think that's something our residents would more identify with as well at the end of the day than the specific scientific, whatever you call it, name of the zoning district.
Yeah. Okay, appreciate that. All right, so I think
So
we've
the
had all the
next slide
comments.
is the boundary. We had a lot of discussions in regard to the boundary of the district, keeping it the same, expanding, shrinking. Through the discussions, we did, for this round of review, we did expand the boundary to include some of the Penn State golf course property. That was to provide development opportunities, as well as the residential area to the east, a couple of blocks of residential area there, kind of squared off the district. I believe a lot of those properties are rental. There was some interest in seeing the boundary expanded there. I will say that this was not, by far, was not a majority opinion. There was a lot of differing opinions in terms of the boundary, whether it should expand, stay the same, or shrink. So that's why it's a question here today, because it wasn't clear-cut in regard to the input that we received, what should be done with the boundary. We did see some opportunity for development if we included the Penn State property. As we know, Penn State has not shared any future plans, what they would like to see with their property, but that is some open space area that is adjacent to the district. So just opening that up for discussion from the board and the planning commission.
Can we get a resource up there when we're looking at that expansion? I've heard the stories of that being water, et cetera, recharge important. So can we get the Webbia floodplainy water recharge map up? Because here's what I think, I don't know, but what I have heard, which we're trying to confirm, is that would sort of be inviting a songbird sanctuary situation, if you see what I'm saying there. Like somebody, oh, now we have a good idea for development. Oh, now we actually have to fight against that development because that is the old rail bed, that is all of that recharge area, and that is where we want to preserve for people to be able to walkie-walkie and it not be developed because of the water recharge. But I don't know if any of that is true without seeing some sort of floodplain map. Right, remember we had to pay the money to get the songbird sanctuary because it was zoned in a way that allowed for development, and we didn't just change the zoning to not allow for that development, and so then they wanted to just develop it, and they had every kind of right to, and then we had to navigate that, and now it's a park, right? We had to go through that process. So if this is another, not with Penn State, with a totally different person, but if this is that kind of a property, we don't want to expand for development purposes. However, that concept, love it so much. And what I would suggest is instead of that little twig of a stem being expanded, include the entire rest of the golf course that hits up to North Atherton. That's where they need to do the infill. They need to do the infill north, south, west, east of that fancy place that they built for the golfers. That's where the infill goes, in towards the city, not out in our corridor that drives drivers onto our road, clogging it up where we don't need more development. That road is so clogged and so fast moving, we don't want to navigate more entryways onto it. It's just how I'm seeing it there. We want to, they already have that parking garage. Many millions of dollars went into that West Campus development there, and we had a very elaborate discussion with the borough on where parking, parking, but also cars and traffic should or should not exit. Because that's a nexus, right? People are going to 99, people are going when they leave. So that is a very important thing that we want to think about, where we want all of that flow coming out of those parking garages. We don't want it there. They're going to try to go to Blue Course. That's where all that water situation is. We want it up in the golf course where they're going on to their West Campus Drive that they've cut off from us, that we can't access from the neighborhoods. We're not allowed to do that. right? So they can put their people onto that and manage their people properly onto PennDOT roads. So that is my thought on the expansion onto that corridor.
Do you have the map of the current boundary line?
It's on the very first slide. It's
And for
small.
reference, the floodplain, it's starting behind the MMA, heading towards Coral. It's
Coral.
not included
It's not
in
toward
this
Blue Course.
edition.
So it's like not floodplain, floodplain, not floodplain, like that, okay.
This is the current boundary.
Yeah, I would
The
keep that.
floodplain starts back here.
Okay.
None of this is included in that area.
Where are you pointing?
Yeah, which way is that?
Can you see? So the MMA studio is here.
Okay,
All the floodplain is
and that's
back.
Coral, what you just touched.
Coral's right here.
So where I would say expand is, see how that weird edge comes way pointy out at the very tippy top of the slide? I would be expanding in that space. That's golf course, isn't it?
Well, that's the floodplain. The floodplain.
Is the golf course inhabiting the floodplain?
Basically those trees, you can't really tell, that swath of trees between the golf course and the
Is the
TSB
So then
boundary.
that's where the rail trail is.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, then I still wouldn't be expanding into that for rail, because of the rail trail
Yes,
purposes.
and that's not what we are proposing.
Okay, can you then show that?
What we are proposing is to add this portion of Penn State's property into the district because of the public input we had received on the public improvements for this district. We want sidewalks, we want more pedestrian connectivity, and the only way we can get that along this corridor is if this is included in the zoning district when they eventually subdivide or develop their property.
And then on the other end, along Buckout, does it increase down there too? I can't
Nothing
see.
has changed over here. The only increase is Penn State right here. And then down on the bottom right-hand corner, this
Yeah.
one block, there's only one owner-occupied home in that block. Everything else is rentals, and that property owner has requested to be included into the zoning district now that the 7-story student high-rise is next door to her home.
Okay, so I wanted to go to the planning commission first this time, so Jerry, if you want to go through comments on this one.
Ralph, you had something?
You just made a comment about getting sidewalks and whatnot. Now, I thought we had the ability to require a landowner to install sidewalks anytime.
Yes.
A 5-foot sidewalk, it would not be required to comply with our design guidelines that this district would have.
Which I'm sorry we didn't get to them first, because like that was part of my comment, like what's up with the 12-foot sidewalks and why aren't they 5? So like I'm maybe where you're at with that. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really not in favor of including the Penn State land with this, because there's an awful lot more land behind that as well, and I think it ought to be dealt with, you know, not in pieces, but as a whole.
Well, that was going to be when we get to the board, I was going to ask if that splits parcels.
Yes.
It does.
Yeah, they would have to subdivide, it would have to be subdivided.
You can have 2 different zoning districts on a parcel.
Okay.
We had it for the first student housing development at the corner there, where the drop-down is for the 2 stories, that is the borough line, essentially. They only permit 2 stories, and we permit 7 for that one.
Okay, we'll go back to planning if you want to.
Yeah, I do, just on one particular aspect of the expansion, and I understand Ralph's concerned about it, but I also share Laura's concern about Penn State potentially extending the exit off their new parking garage onto Blue Course. I think that's wrongful thinking. I don't think that's a good idea at all. Could lead to a lot of other problems for the township in particular. So that part of it, you know, I like, but I could certainly see differences of opinion, like Ralph says, with other properties that are adjacent to that.
Yep, Rob.
Having grown up in Columbus, Ohio, and within 2 blocks of the Ohio State Golf Course, there's nothing but housing around that place. And it's very good, it's very nice. I think that lower part could easily go and be kind of somewhat townhome type thing people would really like. And I think if you did it right, it could work very well. And I think that Penn State's not going to do anything until we decide what we're going to do. And I think if we had the option, that I'm sure they could find a developer that would be willing to work with us to do a nice inlay or infill, I should say.
Of an R2 or
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
Not TSD, is what you're
No,
saying.
yeah. Well, I think you could do it, TS, I think you could do it. I sent Jenna, I'll go back again, I sent her a thing, there's a place in Columbus, when we were, I was a grad student there, but it was called the Continent. And basically what they did was they laid out, the first floor was all retail, restaurants or bank, something like that. The second floor was all apartments or townhomes. And what it was just a lot of people moving around. It was based on a Parisian style that, you know, you kind of had a mixture of things. People go up and down and have a lot of things. Now, the bad point is, it's out of business now. But I think it was we're talking back in the late 70s, early 70s, and I don't think people were ready for that yet. And I think now we've got people, professional couples, that would love to be able to say, I'm living in this area, we'll go down, we'll have drinks at the bar, we'll have a nice restaurant, we'll have these other amenities. We can get, probably, I'm sure Penn State would work out, they could probably get the shuttle bus running in and out, so.
And that sounds more like the traditional town development concept,
Yeah.
which, might, it's close to there, but, again, the struggle is filling those commercial spaces now, and the same issue is occurring up at that Pine Hall development. So while I agree that that would be a nice use, I don't know if this would create that reality, so.
I think that's what Trish, when I was on, Trish was doing this, I think that's what she had initially in mind.
Yeah, okay. Other, Ellen?
I noticed, I live right near there, so I noticed a lot of bikes, a lot of people walking all the time there. I think a sidewalk would be very nice, actually. And the other thing I think about it is if we do landscape it right, make it look nice, it'll increase the entranceway for the golf course and make it nicer overall. And I think that would be a real plus. I also totally agree, I don't want cars driving through there for exiting the parking garage. But I don't even know why did that Coral Street exit get closed off at one point?
Penn State.
They closed it off?
I
Okay.
think didn't they request it? You were here. Wasn't it their request, and there was a trade for some Blue Course property when we wanted to do that road or something?
Do you remember? I don't remember.
This is when T-Berry was built, probably.
Yeah,
I remember they bought the first two houses
Yeah.
across the street from Coral Street because that was going to be their grand entrance, and then tore them down, and then I don't recall,
Okay.
other than the fact that they wanted to put in a parking area there, and we had a prohibition against a standalone, being a parking facility being the primary use of a lot at that point.
I also think when Blue Course Drive was built, then it's not necessarily anymore for a cut through, but,
I think that was the rationale.
yeah.
Because that would be a perfect exit
Would be
of the
perfect,
parking
wouldn't
garage,
it?
yeah.
That road is still, isn't it part of their
Yeah.
property, where at Pond, they could develop that?
Yeah, yeah.
I believe. I don't know what the rules are with
It
that,
looked
but
like it, but yeah.
You're talking about Coral Street.
that's
Yeah, okay.
my understanding, yeah.
Okay, Planning Commission, other comments?
We haven't heard from Lisa.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Lisa, you there?
Yeah, I'm here. I don't really have a preference on the name, I think, to be honest. I think that I really don't know. I mean, West College Avenue, that changing, I don't have a preference on the name itself. I don't really have I don't have a lot to comment on it yet.
Louis?
I just have a question with regard to, and I heard something, when we say sidewalks would be 12 feet deep, is that implicit within that, that would be for both pedestrian and bikes?
No, bikes aren't allowed on sidewalks.
Yes, they are.
Sidewalks are for pedestrians.
Here?
Yes.
Yeah, unless it's in
Oh,
certain
Because,
areas.
As long as it can be operated safely.
because we just
Right. It's
returned
different in the borough.
yesterday from Central Europe. And in the major cities there, frequently, they will have wide sidewalks, and there will be a line. And half of it is for bikes and half is for pedestrians. And if you don't really want to encourage biking on College Avenue, and so it's just something to think about. I mean, if you're a pedestrian, you're walking on the right side. If you're on a bike, you're on the left side, and there's a line that tells you which side of the street or which side you are on.
Yeah, that has not come up yet during our discussions.
Okay.
And I'm not sure it's relevant for this, but it's, if you have 12 feet wide, it's something that you can play with.
Okay, other planning commission comments? Jennifer?
Yes, when I lived in Copenhagen, as you were talking about, but it was actually a lane, a bike lane, and it was raised a little bit from the lane of travel for vehicles. So there was the lane of travel, then a slightly raised area that was the bicycle lane, and then next to that, an
The
additional
sidewalk.
step up that was the sidewalk. So there wasn't any confusion as to who was supposed to be where.
Sure, yeah. That is a very interesting idea, for sure.
Okay, let's go to the board for comments on boundary lines. To Corey and Patty online first.
No, I don't have anything further to add about boundary line.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add either. I think I would just defer to what the residents there prefer.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Don't really have anything to add other than I was just gonna make note. The sidewalks would be helpful, especially just before the golf course across from the State Farm Agency. There is currently an existing bus stop that just basically throws passengers out into a snowbank or a mud pile or whatever it is during whatever season of the year. And then the other thing, and I don't want to get too far off on this, but just going up Blue Course Drive there, just before that rail trail, there is currently a designed, the Blue Course is already designed for traffic to go in and out with the curb cuts and such there. And then across from that, they're actually looking at the rudders right now, so.
So that could be an entrance and exit.
Could be an
No
entrance
matter
or
what
exit
we
point,
decide
especially
on
whatever
this,
they
yeah.
want to do with that corner of Blue Course and College in the future.
I'm sorry, who are you talking about right now? Are you talking about Rudders, or are you talking about Penn State? Because right now, that's rural agricultural. So right now, they can put cows there if they want to.
Perfect.
So I'm just trying to figure out which landowner, you're saying they can do whatever they want to. Let's be clear, right now, they can farm
But-
there, which we included golf course as agricultural for them, okay, just for them. I argued vehemently against it because in agricultural preservation, I got a booklet from Penn State that said you should not be including these kinds of uses because you should be doing farming uses. People think of golf course as farming. It is not farming. If they were picking up the turf and then selling it, that would then be some form of agriculture. That's not what they're doing. So right now, they can do ag there, and we let them do golf course there because we're being cooperative with them. But in the past, sorry, I don't want to, I just wish other older board members were here because there is a wealth of history about that corner right there that not many other people in this room know, and I barely know. That's really, really important that we wish we knew.
And I totally acknowledge the Penn State property right now is RA.
Yeah.
And I was just talking about that section north of where, or just up from where we have extended the TSD boundary according to this map.
Okay. Rob, do you have something? Thought I saw a hand go up over there. I appreciated the thought about having something more like a TTD area expanding down along Blue Course, but I'm not convinced about this expansion on this end. So I think possibly in our next review of this, if we could see another option, I cannot envision how that would be a successful rezoning in that end without doing the entire parcels, without considering what's across the street. Those are established, functioning businesses on the other side of West College, and so why we're including them, I'm not certain about at this point. And then I understand the property owner along Buckout wanting to be included so that they can do what they will with their property, but expanding it even further south along Coral Street, which I'm having trouble seeing exactly what we're...
back up again while you're talking. It's very hard to,
it's just
in your mind,
small.
keep the old map, old and new map.
So the old map, I do want to remind everyone that the Waffle Shop, this whole area is currently in the Terrace Streetscape District.
But on the other, where does it end on the other side right now?
We cut right through, it's at West College, and the idea with including this portion of Penn State's property is so that we can potentially get those successful businesses on the other side of the road, having those public amenities, the benches, the lights, the 12-foot sidewalk, so we have pedestrian activity in this area, because right now it's dead on that side.
Can I add something? Just a point of consideration is, right now, there is really no sidewalk in front of State Farm and in front of the insurance agent. There's just this gravel kind of, and in front of the vet also. So it's really bad right there. So even just making that a sidewalk would improve the whole place a whole lot, so.
We just ruled on that. We just literally went through land development with Center Animal, and we allowed them to not put that 12-foot sidewalk in. So I think that that was a board question that we deliberated on for some time. And I asked some significantly stupid questions, because I don't mind doing that, because I want to be seated in my knowledge. And we discussed the sidewalk connectivity, and we discussed how we could require a landowner to put that in. But we literally said to Center Animal Hospital, that's ridiculous that you have to put a 12-foot sidewalk in. And now we're sitting here going if only we could get those 12-foot sidewalks. And it's a little bit why are we doing that, I guess? And so if there's a reason, then we just goofed. And, we just totally goofed on that. And so I don't want to go on about that, but just to seat our knowledge, it's a bit of a red herring to me to say, boy, we really need sidewalks. And I remember when PennDOT wanted to do the 322 thing, and the reason why everybody was yay, it's because it would improve safety at one intersection. Now look at all the other implications we're not considering. So yes, do we want sidewalks? Yes. Do we want pedestrian stuff? Yes. I think we're spending a lot of time, though, focused on, for some reason, a small upgrade of Penn State property being the solution to that, whereupon it's really not. The solution to that is board will. Cut and dry. Right now, we could put 5-foot sidewalks in, and we clearly sent every property owner a signal that that's what we want when we allowed Center Animal Hospital. Now, why would we say, oh, that's fine for Center Animal Hospital, but y'all are going to have to do this big one? That's sort of how I'm thinking about
Well, and part of the discussion too was concentrating the TSD in a smaller area. So that's what we were talking about at the time, because this western end was more established and trying to kind of keep the focus on that core area. So so I'm not comfortable with exactly this proposed expansion of this. So if we could have, I guess, various comparison maps and some different options when we come back to look at it next time, I think that'd be helpful. I know Jennifer had something.
My recollection when we were speaking about this in the Planning Commission and the sidewalk size was the fact that West College is only 2 lanes and people are driving like maniacs already, and the larger sidewalk could offer more of a pedestrian buffer zone for the safety of the people walking.
Absolutely
From out of
true.
control, poor judgment on some of the people that are driving along there. It also, as a CATA bus operator, the deeper the sidewalk is, then that gives the larger vehicles more opportunity to have line of sight as they approach intersections or any parking lots that are letting out into the street. And the larger vehicle does take a longer stopping distance. So even at 25 miles an hour, it does take a little more. So the less buffer zone we have from the curb of the street to a structure that increases the danger, essentially. And we want this to be a walking community, and a biking community would be great as well.
I hear what you're saying as actually matching what the chair is saying in this idea of us having that deeper or more dense pedestrian center over here where it's already there, and then out here where we already just said, no, you can have a narrow sidewalk. Like, there's not a bunch of pedestrians that are gonna be going out there. Like Waffle Shop, Center Animal Hospital, residential neighborhood, right now, like any pedestrians, that's a stabilized population zone. Over here to the right, you've got a dynamic population thing happening, which is what we want to manage, which is what I think Chair, even though we have definitely significant differences, I think that we are on the same page in terms of this idea that population management, that pedestrian walkability, it's decreased to more match the borough and not to be so terraced. And also it's focused down here. Down here, although we've got that leg of businesses, if we included those things in office commercial, again, when I was looking at this, I was like, oh, that's office commercial, and that's as big as an office commercial zone as we have on North Atherton. It's not really spot zoning. Anyway, I'm not going to get off on that tangent. The point is, the dynamic nature of the population that you've got on the right-hand side of the map, you don't have on the left-hand side of the map. Again, we're creating that problem. Why? In the past, supervisors have told me multiple things. They did not want a standalone parking garage with a primary use. Same thing, you reminded me. Are we now creating that? Are we now going to zone it out to there and we can have primary use as a parking garage?
And municipal owned.
Municipal owned. So, okay, so we don't create that. We also didn't want big sports facilities out there. I also have traveled significantly with my husband, who is an academic, and we've been in many campus areas. The worst thing to encounter is a wasteland that you've got to walk across in your dressy stuff for the conference. And let's not create that here, right? Let's create the proper, vibrant edge piece that borders the neighborhood. So the idea of a capital campus portion that is uninhabited but by parking garages that one must transfer to get from one's neighborhood to the core is not what I'm interested in. And I think that we have to be very careful with that landowner, as other board members have been, and they have been notoriously silent. I think that their silence is a word that they are speaking to us, although we do not know it. Their words are coming to us. I don't think that we, any of us, would assert that we should change the zoning of Penn State without them knowing it. That's just a ballpark guess for me, being 8 years in this seat. So I don't know if that is or isn't true, but I would never suggest that. I didn't hear any resident suggest that. I don't know kind of who that suggestion came from, but I'm definitely very not interested in moving forward like you. In this other side, I think if we want those sidewalks, then we should not be making the decision that certain landowners don't need to have them. They either all do or they all don't, and there should be a point on that map where we know this is the population density that we're managing for CATA, et cetera, and this is where we've got a stable population that we are not. So, because this board decided at Center Animal Hospital, we are not doing that. We are doing, was it 5 foot or 8? I forget. 5?
It was 5 foot because we were about to undergo this project, and we didn't want to require 12-foot sidewalks and all the lighting, trees and whatnot if that was gonna change as a result of this process. Now, going through the public input process, the biggest thing that we've heard from neighbors is they don't feel safe walking in this area. And the only way to improve that safety is to have those large sidewalks.
I think that the way to improve that safety is to mandate that every one of those property owners on the other side of the street that hasn't fulfilled their obligation to put in their sidewalk does so, and then this board will.
And we will be talking
So-
about threshold for when we require the design guidelines. Because right now, the only time we require the 12-foot sidewalks is full-fledged land development. That does not need to be the reality of this.
I'd be interested.
These
in
are good
hearing-
questions.
Yeah, and hearing more about the safety concerns, because I didn't hear that at the charrette, or those public forums. So I think, if that was conveyed at a different time, that's just not something that had been brought to the board at any point in a discussion. So
Is it MMA that the TSD currently ends at?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. That's that white blotch in about the middle there?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
there's-
so right now, we've got the 12-foot sidewalk requirement. Right now, we've got it out to MMA. And what I would do is, I would say, and where's Center Animal Hospital? Is it that white blob on the bottom? That's Center Animal. Okay, and part of, I think the board discussion was, it also, the 5-footer matched the Waffle House shop. So the idea of the 5-foot being out that direction and from MMA this way, the 12-foot also is relevant to that population density idea that we're exploring.
I was just gonna say in front of the Starks Auto Body, it's this path in the grass that I see a lot of people walking on. And in fact, it's a pretty well developed path, so there's a lot of people that just go, and that's even more dangerous.
Right now, your board
Yeah.
could do something about that.
Okay.
let's go to the manager. Did you have a comment?
I was going to echo some of what we heard from Jenna in that we have heard that the inconsistency with the connectivity there in the West College corridor has posed some concerns. And if you've ever walked it, and if you haven't walked it, I would just encourage that you do walk it, because I think as it's been described, there are just trying to follow the path in itself. You're on a sidewalk, and then you're in the grass, and then you're in a driveway. So I just would say to the board that we have heard that feedback. I haven't ran a police report to determine what, if any, incidents have been, reported through PD. I also am trying to pull up the Center Region Bike Plan. I vaguely recall that the connectivity, a proposed amenity, was to connect some type of connectivity into the Blue Course shared use path. And then I also just want to acknowledge as well that the sidewalk, that we are not able to have cyclists on sidewalks. That is prohibited. But what we have created, and Trish Meek used to speak pretty regularly, the shared use facilities. So a shared use path would support and allow bicyclists and really any type of activity except for a motor vehicle. But sidewalks alone, we are not able to have bicyclists, but we can have bicyclists on shared use paths. So what you see there leading up to the waffle shop there, right in front of the Songbird Sanctuary entrance, that's considered a shared use path, so you can have cyclists on that. So I just wanted to provide that clarification. Excuse me?
Maybe that's in the borough.
I'm not sure if that's actually a standard that comes from PennDOT, but I know that it is in our code of ordinance.
Sorry.
So it would be, let's see here, motor vehicles and traffic, Part 7, regulation of pedocycles.
And say that's a PennDOT requirement. You are not allowed to have bicycles on your sidewalks here. But to your point, Centrise, if you have the multi-use paths, shared use paths, which are not your typical sidewalks, they're typically not concrete, they're either like a crushed limestone or something, then you can have, or asphalt even, but you can have, if it's not a sidewalk, you can do multi-use. sorry, go ahead.
This is not what we have been told for many, many years from the region. We have been told that sidewalks are 100% fine as long as the bike is operated safely.
You have to dismount legally.
Now,
legally.
Now you have to
and
dismount
walk.
when you cross a street.
No, on sidewalks, you have to.
What I'm saying is that we were told that when you're riding your bike on the sidewalk, when you get to the street, you go like, oh, there's a street. I'm being a pedestrian. I get off my bike, I walk it through the crosswalk, then I get back on my bike on the sidewalk and I go. This is what we have been told, very specifically in great detail. So I'm not saying that what you're saying in the code isn't correct, but there have been many times when the region does one thing and our code does another. So, and PennDOT does yet another. So I'm not saying anything that you've said isn't true. I'm just saying what I've said is also true.
So anecdotally or just in general conversation, there's some different messages being conveyed. So if there's other comments on this, let's
I
wrap
just have
this
a
question up.
question with regard to what we've just been discussing. Is it a matter of semantics? Because it's my understanding, and perhaps I'm wrong, that in Saybrook, once you leave the bike path, what I call the bike path, and you come up what would be the western side, which is a much wider, that is okay for riding its bicycles on that. Now, maybe that's considered part of the bike path, but it is also the sidewalk, because there is no other sidewalk there. So, as I said, it becomes a matter of semantics. If we call it a bike path as opposed to a sidewalk and a 12-foot wide bike path, and pedestrians and bicyclists could ride on it, it appears. At least that's what appears in that neighborhood.
Any other comments on this item?
I would
Boundary.
concur that as somebody that has rode scooters in major cities, I am feeling much safer on a shared use path or dedicated bike lane than I am on something like West College Avenue.
Okay, so I think yes.
The only other thing, we were talking about safety, and there may not be a place for this in this conversation, but perhaps moving forward in anything within Ferguson or the municipality. CATA is in desperate need of an actual transit center. All things leading to the university is not serving the community, it's just serving the university. So we're trying to increase our community service, make it more viable. So if there's anything along here, any place or option to have a couple of places for more than one bus to be able to go, where there could be transferring, I don't know if it's anything we're even interested in, but just
Thanks.
saying.
Well, something to keep in mind, probably, I can't imagine we'd have space in this corridor, but, something that we're always looking at. Okay, let's move on to the next.
Definitely good regional.
So we talked a little bit, this was brought up a little bit, but the threshold for applying design guideline requirements, I think Jenna mentioned, currently it's for land development only. So would we want to expand those thresholds to include a percentage of a renovation or expansion or a change of use, that the design guidelines would kick in for those as well, and not just only for new construction? So that's the question on the table.
In the proposed ordinances, it applies only to new construction, because that's what it looked like, that any renovations or anything, it did not apply to.
Right,
Okay,
so that's
we-
why we
okay.
wanted to have this discussion. Do we want to include some additional requirements for a percentage of renovation, expansion, or a change of use?
Minor alteration plans, minor land development plans, those type of things. So what we're talking about for the design guidelines are those public amenities. And when do we want to require those?
And that's that's in the current ordinance is?
The current ordinance includes renovations, land development, et cetera, et cetera. However, planning and zoning staff, we have a old opinion from 2 solicitors ago that we can only apply the design guidelines to land development plans. And that is how historically we have operated in this zoning district.
So to clarify, for example, like MMA is an example of they do a minor change or something, and then they don't have to do the sidewalks, something like that, relating back to sidewalks. Is that the idea here?
So all the changes that have occurred in this zoning district since this ordinance was adopted have been minor alteration plans, which we do not require the 12-foot sidewalks, the whole shebang. What we see going in at the corner of Buckout and College, that is full-fledged land development plan, the first or second land development plan after the Center Animal Hospital, where we did not waive the requirements for the design guidelines, and they are building per those design guidelines.
Okay, but you're saying we could apply them.
To
That's the
minor
opinion.
alteration, minor
Okay.
land development, it's really up to the board, staff, we're just looking for direction on essentially how bad do you want these improvements?
But that's the current solicitor opinion. So you're
Not the
saying
current.
before- You're
We
saying
were-
before, the opinion was we could not apply it to, but now, we think we can.
Now, the ordinance, in my opinion, can be written in a way that is very clear when those design guidelines would be required.
Okay. So, okay, Jennifer?
Regarding that, could there be some research perhaps regarding if there are federal monies available, because we're talking about bicycle and pedestrian safety, even federal money for improving for transit, mass transit or public transit, there should be monies available, things like that, that could help.
We
So
did
if
that before there.
If we do the requirement, then it's like, okay, this is required, and here's how you can get money to help pay for it.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's an assumed practice, is looking for those if the township's actually gonna put something like that in. So good point. We can go to the board first on this. I'll look up at the screen if Patty and Corey. Yeah.
This is Patty. I'd be in favor of including the potential options listed.
Change of use, for a change of use, for a change of use?
Changing
12-foot
use,
sidewalk?
changing use, I would need to run that by our solicitor right now because that is a zoning change in use, that isn't technically land development.
Mm-hmm.
So to be able to require that, that would be something that I'd feel more comfortable having the solicitor review.
But does the board understand what those words mean? That we would be requiring a person who owns a something, if they're just changing the use, to put in a 12-foot sidewalk? So instead of right now us just saying like, hey, as a board, we're really committed to all of the existing business owners there just putting in a sidewalk that we've determined is so unsafe and terrible, instead of us doing that, it's sort of like, we're gonna burden somebody with a change of use only to do it? I'm just confused, because right now, we've got, okay, so we, once upon a time, got a grant, Ferguson Township, whereupon no landowner paid any money whatsoever, and we installed 12-foot sidewalks. The only 12-foot sidewalks, other than the one you just described, Jenna, I believe, were all installed by Ferguson Township, just by grant money, no taxpayer dollars, which is great. What we're doing right now is sort of just like, we're affecting people's lives greatly. And so the idea that we would just say, I'm fine with all of them up there, including change of use, without exploring what that means for, right? So like, then instead of making everybody just put in a sidewalk, just the person that wants to do something different then is mandated a 12-foot. It's kind of a bit wonky what we're doing.
So the grant that we received, those sidewalks that were installed, do not meet the design
They're
guidelines.
8-foot,
They are
right?
8 feet.
We don't even meet our own
Correct.
design guidelines, and yet somebody that does a change of use, now we're gonna
Well,
make them do
the
that.
change of use, that is the one thing I need to review with the solicitor, because that is a zoning issue, that is not land development. So we can't require design guidelines that are in our saldo on a zoning permit.
So can we like officially take that off the list that we're talking about for clarity's sake right now? 'Cause
I need to
it's
see
given me
legally if we
a little
can
bit
do
of-
this or not, and if that isn't something the board's interested in, then I don't need to run it by the solicitor. So.
Yeah, so if anybody, I mean, we can, as we each make our comments, it might just get taken off
Yeah.
the table altogether and not be in the next round of comments. Corey, if you had anything? and Jeremy.
Um,
Go ahead.
Yeah, I would think I hear Laura's concern, but I would be interested in exploring, some of the larger changes, right? If there's going to be a significant addition, those kinds of things. I think that should kick in the design guidelines.
Okay.
Anybody catch that?
So depending on the change of use, was that it?
Yeah, I think so. If we're looking at the scale of the change, right?
The scale, yeah.
I would aim for someone to be able to double the footprint of their existing structure and then not have to follow the design guidelines that we're doing.
And doubling the size of a structure is going to require additional requirements, parking, etc., which would kick them into land development. So the one thing that isn't up on here for me that I need to know is subdivisions. Right now with subdivisions, the township, we do require a 5-foot sidewalk everywhere. Well, not everywhere, but most places everywhere. Do we want to require these design guidelines for subdivisions in this district?
So you're adding that into our potential options
Yeah.
Discussion. Okay.
Subdivisions.
So we'll go to Jeremy and then we can go to Laura and back around if anyone has comments on that.
Really trying to follow this, because I knew Jenna had said about having to consult with the solicitor, so kind of sounds to me like maybe there is something to maybe look further into, and then kind of once I have that story, could better decide. But I would concur with Laura. I think it probably would be more beneficial if we could get all of the sidewalks put in maybe through some type of grant instead of just kind of having this piecemeal, which what we got now, where you have a mix of grass, shared use past sidewalk, maybe wood plank road. So, yeah, something like that.
Laura.
I think that's a great point. I think that we're solving an existing, very real problem, but with the wrong tool. Zoning is not the tool that's used. It's the tool that we gave our staff, and so it's the tool that they worked with, because they know that the board is very hesitant to make a landowner install a sidewalk. It's a huge endeavor, it's costly. We've got places that are questionable, that should be joined in sidewalk, that we're not making them do, all over this township. It was shocking to me. And one of the things that came out of our strategic plan that's been in the works for, I think, about 1.5 years now, and we haven't seen, but in there somewhere is a potential action item to identify all of those places and then go for money to help landowners do that, because we recognize the difficulty. But I just want to get back to why we're here. It's a zoning question, and broadening the zoning map for a specific, very specific sidewalk transportation question. I think that would be the wrong tool to use. We have other tools that we can use, and the bike plan, I spent extensive time with that, and the board did as well. And what happened was there was a minor review of those comments that we sent, and there were some minor changes, but there really needs to be a comprehensive review. We're going for silver standard bicycle community again, right? So like clarifying this question about bikes on sidewalks is huge for policymakers, because when we all were talking about connectivity, we were like, oh, look, they can go for this bike path, then they got a sidewalk through that neighborhood, then they got this, then they got that, because we always thought that that was fine. If that is not fine, that is a huge paradigm shift in active transportation around here. So, I don't know, what's my point? My point is, I do not think that a zoning expansion of the map is appropriate for a sidewalk question, and I think that the board should be asked to take up the question of getting money or requiring the landowners to put the sidewalks in where they're needed, where there's a safety issue. Why not? We should do that separate from this, and then get back to this as a zoning question. I do not like the design guide. I don't like that this is still completely different than the rest of our zoning ordinance. I wanted it to look like the rest of our zoning ordinance. I love consistency, maybe to an OCD level, I don't know, perhaps, but I really wanted this. What did we do in our zoning revision? The opposite of what we did here. So we took every zoning district and we split it into sizes. We're like, RR, we've got X lot sizes, these lot sizes, these lot sizes. And we made uses per those lot sizes. In here, we're like, every lot size, all uses. We did the opposite of what we just did. Why? I don't understand it. I thought we were aligning this to the rest of the zoning code, that was part of the thing that we were doing here. All we've done is kind of like some nudges of this same exact thing. I didn't think we were gonna even use a design guide, much less extend it to all of the rest of this. So like, I'm a bit out of this question because I can't even answer it because I didn't even think there was gonna be a design guide. I thought that there was gonna be a zoning district that was like the rest of our zoning districts, that we could understand because we understood the rest of our zoning code. So that was, I don't know what else to say about that. If we're gonna do something like this, then I would encourage us to be not so restrictive on property owners because we want to encourage development, but also not, not inconsistent. So to be consistent and yet not restrictive. And I would not include change of use at all because I know what it means and it doesn't mean all of the major implications of land development. And so I would never include that. So I would only include number 1, number 3, maybe. And expansion to percent, I'm not sure how that's calculated, percent of expansion. Is it floor space? Is it beds? Is it acreage? Is it, I don't know how to answer that question. So, but
Okay.
I don't care for the particular paradigm that we're using, so.
Can I just ask, what are the lot size minimums and maximums?
So the minimum lot size in the current is at 40.
I believe it was
4,500 square feet, minimum lot size, was what is in the redlined copy.
Okay.
It's on page 8.
Because then we have lot
Yeah.
consolidation concerns. What's our max?
We don't have a max currently.
Same. Lisa never makes faces, so I love that she did that. I'll just let that speak for itself.
Is there one in the current ordinance?
Probably
Not
not.
that I know
I just
of.
want that whole entire thing to be one lot. It's 75
Because I know
feet
there were guidelines for around a 1 acre lot development.
There were guidelines that were for uses on certain sizes of lots and things like that, but there was no maximum lot size that I know of.
And keep in mind, in this current draft, we are proposing to limit building size. So we understand the need for this pedestrian activity. We don't want to have large buildings in this area. So that is part of this proposal. We're looking to limit certain aspects of this to control the massive consolidation of lots and huge
Let's
development.
propose
There's
the
a
maximum lot
maximum
size.
on the footprint of a building
Yes.
that's proposed.
Correct.
Okay, so I think we should have a discussion on that, around what exists there, and, compare it probably to office commercial, general commercial, and village zoning.
Do you have maximum lot sizes in your other districts?
We have minimums.
Right, but you're suggesting now a maximum.
No, we've got different, how it goes is like it's 1 to 3, category this. Blah to blah, category this. Like we've got multiple categories.
tiers
Yeah, we've got multiple, let's take rural residential. There's maybe 4 categories of rural residential. There is indeed a maximum lot size per those categories. Like 1 to 3 acres is a residential. in
For
rural
certain
residential.
uses,
For
yes.
uses.
For
Yeah.
uses.
Yes.
Okay.
So since you're saying all uses for all lot sizes, we gotta jump into that. So then I'm going like, we better minimize those then we have to constrain the lot sizes. it's sort of like cherry picking out of this and our zoning. I'd rather us do our new zoning ordinance.
Can I just
I acclimated to that, and now I really like it, and if we're gonna do it, why not simplify this to that?
Sorry, can I just ask a clarification question about that? So currently in this district, there are, if you have less than 0.4 acres, you can have these uses. If it's more than 0.4, you can have all of those plus these additional. So there are no maximum lot sizes on any of that. You can still do whatever you can do on 0.4 acres or less, you can do on 0.4 acres or more. You just also get additional uses. I'm assuming that is how your other districts are
They build
organized?
upon each other, so
Correct.
overall, yes, we have area bulk categories, 1, 2, 3, 4. There are certain lot sizes within those categories.
For minimums.
For
And
the minimum lot size.
Okay.
But there aren't maximums, if I'm understanding it correctly, right?
I
Well-
think that is correct, Amy.
There are no, so you can, even in residential, you may need, if you have, say, I'm just throwing out numbers because I don't know,
Yeah.
but let's just say in residential, you have a half acre or less, you can do single-family home, say. If you have a half acre up to, say, 2 acres, you can maybe do a duplex. If you have 2 acres plus, you could do multifamily. That doesn't preclude you from having 2 acres plus and only putting a single-family home. So you still don't have maximum lot size requirements. It's just a minimum of what you need to do certain uses. There are no current maximums. I'm not suggesting that you can't have them or that we can't look into it, but it would be, to your point, it would be different than what you currently have. I just want to clarify that. I'm not, we can look into maximum lot sizes, but you do not currently have them.
So
anywhere else.
the building footprint maximum does answer some of that. I think that
Yeah.
does, to me, it speaks to some of that, but I understand how there's it doesn't really align with how we've been looking at the other zoning districts. I understand that.
Can I ask a
So-
question about that, what was just exchanged there about the maximum lot size? And because in the Pine Grove Mill Small Area Planning, I thought one thing we talked about, maybe I misunderstood, that one thing that we talked about in order to make sure we had the proper scale of economic development that we want to encourage there, one thing that we specifically talked about in that village that's been set as akin to this is maximum lot sizes. Is that?
We are exploring that as an option.
Okay, so could we explore that as an option here as well?
Right, that's what I suggested. If you
Okay.
want to,
Yeah.
we can certainly explore it. We did include the maximum building size in an effort to ensure that this area does not see very large-scale commercial or other types of development, right? Because we did understand that was a concern. We can also include maximum lot sizes.
What was your, just out of curiosity, what was your reasoning for taking the building way, because that's also different than the lot, than a lot size way? Like, we do height,
Because if you have, even if you kept the lot sizes the way they currently are with the 0.4 acres or less or 0.4 or more, you could, there's nothing precluding someone from building for example, there's nothing precluding someone from building like a giant hotel or a conference center or something really large. And so by putting in a maximum building size, that addresses, that the idea would be that would address the concern of restricting development to more of a village type scale, neighborhood scale, which this corridor is designed to do. You could obviously, yes, you could include maximum lot sizes too, but I think by simply restricting your building size I think you're effectively getting that, because I can't imagine from a development economic standpoint, there's any real use in having a really giant lot and then putting a, 30,000 square foot building on it.
No, but 2 or 3 buildings on it.
Only one.
Only one is permitted.
But you can only put one on a lot.
Principal use on a lot, yeah.
Okay.
So, again, I'm not suggesting we can't explore the maximum lot size,
Understood.
but that was the idea for the maximum building. That was the idea behind that. And the reason that we took away, or suggesting at least, to take away those 0.4 acre or smaller thresholds, the uses were very, very minimal on what you could really do with those. And so the idea was again, in a small-scale neighborhood-level district, to let the developer or the landowner kind of figure out, again, with maybe a maximum lot or maximum building size, but it was kind of to leave it up to them to figure out what lot, what development they could put in with those permitted uses, that there was nothing wrong with having a small-scale retail store on a smaller lot, that there was, that was okay, that promotes walkability. If you have really large lots and really spread out buildings, it really takes away from the walkability aspect. So the smaller the lots, the closer the buildings, the smaller the storefronts, the more walkability. So that's why we suggested removing that restriction on the 0.4 acres or less, because we didn't see any harm in having more, development on those smaller lots.
As we saw with Liz's plan with Pine Grove Hall, or not Pine Grove Hall, 125 Pine Grove Road, it's a very small lot. She can only do so much on that property, taking into account the parking that would be required, the stormwater that would be required. And why would we sit here and try to socially engineer lot sizes when if we open up the uses, these lots, they're small. You can't propose a massive development without accommodating for all these other requirements in our ordinance. And it's gonna organically leave it up to those landowners to decide what they want to do, what they can do within confines of our ordinances and other requirements.
Okay,
I
so
don't
maybe we're,
disagree.
maybe we're
Councilor.
addressing some of it if we add in the subdivision question in this. And then we also have impervious coverage.
That is a question we
That's
have.
coming, okay. And only one, so you're saying one principal use per lot. We have conditional uses, like the hotel, but that would, if you have one principal use, you couldn't add a conditional use as well.
Correct. Conditional use is a principal use as
And
well.
it went approved. And then accessory uses, there were none
You can have more than one
in the
principal
ordinance,
use.
or were there?
There
There's
are
some
accessory uses in the ordinance currently, and were left in the update. So they are on, trying to find them. Page 4 of 16 in the redlined copy. Currently, your ordinance says, uses accessory to permitted principal uses are allowed subject to the following criteria. So the proposed accessory use is associated with a use specifically permitted in the district. The proposed accessory use is complementary to the specific intent of the district. We also added no impact home-based businesses as an accessory use because the state requires those to be permitted in every district that has residential uses.
That was a comment that I received earlier today from a property owner in this district. We have the no impact home-based business under conditional use. We gotta change that.
We gotta change that,
Yes.
yeah.
Permitted by right.
So, what page did you list the accessory uses on? Sorry. I'm just-
In the redlined copy, it's on page 4 of 16.
Okay. Okay. So one more comment on this, and then I know we have a couple more questions to go to, and we have about 15 minutes before we go to public comment.
Yeah, I don't think we're gonna get through all of the questions today.
Understood.
I kind of can't comment fully on this, but there's a lot that once upon a time we discussed under 0.4 acres as having use constraints that we were really happy about it. We really need that to be the case. That's all I'm going to say. That we made a decision based on that. So it's included in it's continuing to be included in the district. I don't think there's a reason why. I think that it's at an edge. It could be easily sculpted out. I know the chair knows what I'm talking about. Maybe she can talk to staff after this.
Okay.
I don't know,
Okay.
really.
Yeah, we can
I mean,
make a
I
note
don't-
for the next discussion
because
on it,
that
too.
would significantly perhaps impact
Yeah.
and then cause another problem at one edge
Yeah,
there.
I think we're gonna have to come back to this question anyways at our next discussion,
Sure.
yeah.
So the maximum building height, buildings fronting on West College, it's currently 45 feet with incentives with workforce housing for an additional, you can get an additional 10 feet. Buildings not fronting on West College, the maximum building height 35 feet. And then as Amy mentioned in her discussion earlier, parking garages limiting the height to 30 feet with incentives for an additional 15 feet. So a lot of what we heard through the public comment was not to allow additional tall buildings. So we were kind of pretty much keeping with what was in the ordinance with the recent amendment.
Oh, and just to add, the parking garage, remember, that's municipally owned parking garage is the only standalone parking garage allowed, so
Thank you.
just to clarify that.
Yes, thank you, Amy, that is a good point.
Okay, and then the incentive for buildings fronting West College, was there something besides workforce housing, or is that the only incentive?
Currently, that's the only incentive, but we wanted to open up for, do you want to allow other incentives for the additional 10 feet? For instance,
Well, that's a whole other
additional
slide,
green
Jenna.
space, yeah, that's a whole other slide.
Do you want to go to that, just while we're on it?
That is for public space, so.
The other thing that we heard during the public input process, that there is not public gathering space in this area, there is minimal green space. And what I have seen in other municipalities is if these, with development, if the developer provides so much percentage of the lot as public space or green space, that there are incentives provided for that. So it's always different. It can be height, it could be a parking reduction, it could be no parkland fee in lieu required if they provide that public space on site in this corridor. So those were just some of the things that we had heard during the public input process. Additional art, really green space for this area. And I don't want, because this ordinance has historically been tied to building height incentives, know that that doesn't need to be the answer moving forward.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, back on the heights, that was exactly what I had heard in a lot of discussions. I agreed with what was listed in there. And the idea of adding a height incentive, I would not be supportive of, but I thought there were some other creative ideas in there for other types of incentives. I want to go to the Planning Commission first, because I feel like we haven't heard from.
I agree with what you just said, Lisa, about the height. The other options are fine, but how does the workforce housing fit into this
As far as height?
Yeah.
Right now, we have 45 feet maximum, and if they provide the built workforce housing, either on-site or off-site, they would be eligible for those bonus market rate units. And that would be only for one additional floor of height to accommodate those bonus.
That I'm fine with, the rest I'm not so much. I don't know if there's any other comments from our.
Sounds good.
Okay, any other comments on this from board or planning? I know we have probably three more slides to get to here.
Are you taking board comment on this?
Yes.
Okay, I just pulled up pictures of what a 45-foot building looks like, because I couldn't, not spatially inclined. And that's what that looks like. So that, to me, my comment would be, is that that seems high to me. Is it consistent with your understanding that would be four stories, or is that not 4 stories? I'm just approximating here.
It'd be about 4 stories.
Yeah. About 4 stories?
Yeah.
Okay. I think I would prefer to have a 3-story if we're going to offer any kind of incentive whatsoever. I want to encourage that workforce housing incentive, and I wouldn't add, just like Jerry and Lisa, I wouldn't add other height incentives. I would only do the workforce housing. I would drop that down 10 feet to 35, then add that 10-foot incentive. Buildings not fronting West College, I'd drop it down to 25. Parking garages, I don't know, limit height to 30. That is again, I'd have to have a picture of the parking garage. It seems high. Would that be a 2-story parking garage if it were 30
About
feet?
a
3-story?
2.5,
Okay. I mean, you gotta have your ability to build it and get
For it to make sense
your
financially,
investment
yeah.
understood.
And again, on municipal, just to clarify.
And
It's useful
municipal,
to-
so we'd be careful about citing and whatnot. So I guess, okay, but incentives for an additional in 15 and incentivize your own municipality, that's confusing to me. What would we, how would we incentivize ourselves to make an additional?
That was for a green roof, like if you do a green roof and do more, so.
That's
you're addressing
currently
some
in the
stormwater.
ordinance.
Right, so we were
Yeah.
leaving it. We kept it, honestly. It's currently in there. We left it. We just dropped the height down.
Okay, so a green roof was on the parking garage.
Yes, correct.
Typically,
And that
I would
gets the
then not
15.
include that incentive. Just because
Yeah.
I think that that's an expensive and maybe not, I don't know, I would not probably include that.
Yeah.
So.
Madam Chair, it's 2:00.
Okay, thanks. We will try to go.
For a minute.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's
it on that.
I feel like the height was one of our major sticky points here, so we'll just maybe end on this slide and go to public comment after this, because I know we'll need to see this all again. So, Jeremy.
Real quick, 3 stories seems rather safe. I definitely would want to encourage workforce housing, and I don't have anything against anyone wanting to put a green roof up, so.
Yeah, I mean, I would be comfortable, my preference would be 35 as a maximum with a 45-foot with the 10-foot incentive on West College. That would be my preference. I think, this seems like a compromise. So I'd be open to, discussing the 35 and 45 with the 10-foot incentive. So it'd be a max 45 then fronting West College. When we saw this at one of the public meetings, there were some diagrams that really demonstrated what this would look like. So maybe something like that, so that when we're making or having our next discussion on this, we're able to really see what those look like. And again, that's on West College, would be those higher heights.
What's the height of the building that just went up?
75.
75? Okay. Yeah, anything's an improvement.
We can parachute down off that one into the other ones.
Agreed. Okay, other comments from planning or the board on the height?
I like the 35 also. I was thinking though, this is probably if we had a green space on top, how we want more green space on West, maybe that could be a usable green space for meetings and things. Or having.
So maybe looking at some other green, because there was something, maybe that was for the parking garage incentives. It was a flat roof, then you could do some other things. So maybe exploring that for our next discussion. Okay. Rob.
You mentioned parking garage height. Does that mean, what about depth?
Underground?
Building size?
Building size.
Yeah.
Building size
So it goes back to that footprint. Was the parking garage the same as any other?
building size?
We
Building
matched them
size?
all up.
So
So you could have 35-foot height, but it could be I don't know how many.
1 story underneath the ground.
It didn't,
underground?
it didn't count
Yes, we don't
underground.
restrict.
We don't restrict underground,
Of course, it's probably all stone there, so you're not going down.
Other things would restrict how far down we can go.
Stuff in there.
The corner building goes underground, so there's, but that wasn't counted in their stories and their feet.
Correct.
Right, okay.
Correct, it's only above ground.
Okay, other comments before we go to, yes?
Regarding the height incentive for workforce, when we were talking about the workforce incentives, they could trade for spaces out of that area, different properties, they could trade all of that. I'm wondering, I was wondering during that conversation, is it creating a loophole so that somebody could come in and get a taller building, and then what we want is affordable housing in this area, and then they procure some land somewhere else or use some land somewhere else, and we don't have that affordable housing in this area because they were able to do that incentive.
So the current workforce housing ordinance, you are eligible for the bonus market rate units, if you build the units on-site or off-site. So if they choose the off-site option, they do get that additional bonus, and the off-site needs to be within the regional growth boundary of Ferguson Township. So the idea here is we really need affordable housing everywhere, specifically within the regional growth boundary where there is public transit, sidewalks, that connectivity. So the current ordinance permits the bonus market rate units for any units that are coming online, being built on or offsite.
So follow up, that includes Pine Grove Mills though, which is within the regional growth
Yes.
boundary, but has none of the assets that you just described.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, any other comments before I go to public comment? It's 2:05. Okay, I'm not seeing any. And I'll just say the last couple of questions we'll be reviewing at our next round of discussion.
Yes, we will work with township staff to determine since we didn't get to cover everything today, moving forward, how we're gonna get those answered and update based on your comments that we did receive today.
And I think as much material as you can get to both planning commission members and the board ahead of time, so we're prepared with our, I think that will
Yeah, we'll
expedite
schedule we'll make sure that we build in enough time for further review. And because we'll be providing a lot of additional support material as well.
Very good. Okay. All right. Thanks.
Lisa, there are a number of things, questions that I have, but I don't really want to take time. Obviously, we don't have time today. Would I could have permission to speak with Jenna to go over my specific, some of them are technical matters. I don't want to do so unless you think it's okay.
Yeah, I would leave that up to the manager and Jenna to decide how they want to move the planning commission discussion forward. And probably some of your questions are held by your fellow commission members too. So I'd leave that up to them, how they want to move that.
I don't want to be presumptuous, but they very well may not.
Yeah. So I don't know, but I would.
I have a problem in that I'm only one person, but I spent over 45 years doing this type of work as an attorney, a municipal solicitor. But they're relevant for planning, for these documents, but as I said, it's up.
Yeah, so I would leave that up to them, but, just to encourage all that information to be shared with the rest of your planning commission members, discussions and questions and information that's shared there. Okay, so let's go to public comment. I think I saw Wes, if you want to come up to the podium and give your.
We're handing
We can hand that back over to you. But if you want to come up to the podium
Wes,
with
please,
your name and so we can get you on first,
Well, then everybody else stand up.
Gladly. Oh, man. Whew. Was that inning stretch?
I'll stand, I'll rise for West.
Is this on?
Yes, you're
Okay,
good.
West Street, 115 North Butts. One comment that I want to make is about green roofs. When this first came up back in 2010, I went and saw Rob Burgos in Tyson Building and got the short course on green roofs. They're typically beneficial in cities where you can have a lot of green roofs and you have a combined stormwater and sewage system, and you're trying to keep as much water immediately out of that system. So the problem, even with that, is that if you have a green roof, it's only going to catch and hold an inch of water. So if you have 3 inches of rain, you're still going to have 2 inches going into the sewer system. Well, we have a split system here. You also have the problem of drought. The dry period that we just had would probably toast the sedum that consists of a green roof. What is my point? Forget it. It's a dumbass incentive for this area. It doesn't make any sense. If you want more certified, sanctified data talk to Rob Burgos, Tyson, Penn State University.
He retired.
Oh, young. He's on the water authority.
Other public comment on this? Pam? Pam,
There she is.
Yeah. Okay, Pam, if you want to give us your name and township of residence.
Can you hear us, Pam?
Yes.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yep, you're good to go.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. It's hard to understand you guys. It's a little fuzzy. I'm thinking green roof was going to be a bad idea as well. And I would like to see solar considered. If we could get solar on roofs, like serious solar, like really, not just a couple of panels, but like covering a roof. And I think that might be considered as a good incentive. You know, I'm still into as low as possible, however. I just wanted to throw solar out there. I think that this is something that, personally, I would really like to see it as on all buildings going forward. I'll put it that way. So that's my little thing for today.
Thank you, Pam. And I think solar is included in the parking incentive. We were saying green roofs, but I think solar, something.
Is there a table of incentives, like a?
No.
I mean, I'm not we
Yeah.
anymore. I'm done being we, but can y'all get that?
Yeah.
Can y'all get a table of incentives?
And how about wind?
Wind energy conversion system. This is what I'm seeing in here. So you can correct me if I'm looking at the wrong thing. So wind energy conversion system or solar panels placed on the roof, providing energy. And that was for the parking structure incentive.
Not like a windmill, probably like a turbine that's.
Yeah, because I think everything is counted in height. So
Yeah.
I think
You'd be like doing that, you know.
they wouldn't want to use up their height
No.
on
Different
on
kind
a
of turbine.
windmill. So
And do we have this crafted that those would be practical to put under? I think I recall with the Dollar General, I believe Pam was talking about solar panels and the developer was like, we can't put them on there because of either the way they designed the building or maybe even something about like trees would eventually grow and like basically shade over the.
yeah, I mean, I think it's given as an option. So if the developer makes it work, then it's up to them if they
Yeah,
use that as an
that's true.
incentive. But I guess to your point, there's no stipulation that it has to be function. Or what is going to guarantee that it's functional. So it does need to place on the roof and provide energy for the parking structure and adjacent structures. So what's the flip side of that? When do we know that it doesn't if something goes wrong? So I guess
Oh, is that another single parking space situation? They could put like, you can charge your cell phone with a tiny little solar panel, right? Could they get like a teeny tiny solar panel from Amazon and like put it there and be like, look, we get all of the things now. And because we got burned so bad on that one
Right.
single parking spot, we will never forget that.
Right.
So criteria, I think, is what Jeremy is saying.
Stuff
So
like that,
it
trying
says-
to find the unintended consequences.
Yeah, so it
before we
says a
have-
minimum of 50% of the roof is planted as a green roof or a wind energy or solar panel. So I guess the solar panels and
Would
wind
be
energy,
50%.
that's, yeah, it's not clear if that's defined as the space needs, so I guess we could look,
Sorry.
yeah, we could look at the
We didn't
language.
get to
Oh.
discuss these
That's
sort
true.
of questions,
Okay.
but I
True.
think that that's something to consider, right? What
Okay.
Jenna, wanted us to bring up, and so I think just moving forward, thinking through incentives in general, so maybe we can compile them in
Yes.
their own kind of document.
Yeah, I think that would be
And then you
great.
can review that and kind of see what you like first, like what you even want to consider using them for.
Yeah.
And then if you
Then
want
detail
them,
Right.
what stipulations we put on.
Yeah.
What criteria should be included?
And then just to reiterate Pam's point on the height incentive, I think that was just more feedback to what they were saying about, maybe going back to 35, 45. So getting some of that to look at for our next discussion. And more, yes, Christine, if you want to come up to the podium.
Christine Bailey, North Butt Street, Ferguson Township. I just wanted to say how important I think it is that we need sidewalks on West College Avenue. I don't care how wide they are, but you need sidewalks. I've seen an old lady pushing a stroller, one of these.
A walker.
A walker along West College because there's right on the roadway because there is no sidewalk. And that the corner of Coral Street and West College where the incentive pedestrian light is, there are no sidewalks on the opposite corner
Correct.
of where Porter Brothers used to be and on Coral Street up there. Please, let's have some sidewalks. I don't care how you get them. You have to have sidewalks. There are a lot of people who come from the McMath Street area who walk and who bike. And we see them on our alley. We're on Grass Alley. And we see them. And there are far more people who walk and bike to the university or wherever downtown than you would ever imagine. You do traffic studies with cars. Let's do it with pedestrians and bikers as well. Because I think it's far too important to not do, and there are people going to be killed on West College Avenue now that building is built. No matter what, there are no pedestrian crossings for another thing. There are no signs for pedestrians to cross. There are no signs for pedestrians to cross unless you're at the waffle shop, Coral Street.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks.
definitely something to undertake.
Very good.
Okay, so we've reached the end. Is there anything the consultants wanted to add at this point?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I just have one quick question for
Yes.
clarification for
Yes.
staff. You had asked to have the materials provided with advanced time to review the material. Would you please give an idea of what you're looking for so we can be sure to meet that request? Are you looking for a week, 3 to 5 days, just because we have competing priorities and I want to be sure that we're meeting the request?
Right. I think if whatever the consultants want to bring as the presentation with the included questions, maybe that we didn't get to, and kind of reframing what we've discussed with the examples that we've asked for, I think having that just a few days ahead of time so that I think it'd expedite our discussion a little bit if we're knowing what we're going to need to be focused on. So,
Okay.
but yeah, I think just a few days of having kind of what we were presented with here, just having that a little bit ahead of time with those specific questions laid out, I think.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, not way in advance, just.
So if we would have had this presentation provided, or the questions that we intended to ask provided with the agenda, that would have been helpful.
Yeah, I think just some, like I said, additional maps, maybe with the current, just to have it all compiled so that we have that there, and the great diagrams you'd had at the one public meeting of the building heights. I think that's really, really useful in all of us trying to imagine what those different building heights will look like. Okay, so if you all didn't have any other questions, and I know you'll be in touch with staff with anything else you have, Jerry, if you have anything else.
No, we're good.
Okay, really appreciate everyone's time and all that discussion. There's a lot to get through, obviously, since we didn't get through it all. So looking forward to the next discussion. So we have a number of calendar items listed in the agenda, and if there is nothing else, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Yeah, we'll take a second from the board.
Mrs. Petty, I'll second.
Okay, and we are adjourned. Thank you.